I have with me today Fred Dinenage, MBE. Welcome to the event, Fred. You know, you've been a media legend here in the UK for many, many years. What's been the pivotal moment that caused you to begin this 57 career and counting career in journalism?
It all started completely by accident, John. I was just 21. It was towards the end of 1963. I was a journalist on the Evening Argus newspaper in Brighton and quite happy doing that. This was in the days, of course, when TV was much smaller than it is now. There was BBC One, there was ITV, a tiny bit of BBC Two. It was all in black and white. I was very happy on the Evening Argus in Brighton. One day into the office walked a lady called Annie Nightingale, who's now become the oldest disc jockey on Radio 1. At the time, she was doing a lot of TV and writing a column in the Evening Argus in Brighton, where she lived. She came in the office one day and said, "I've just been talking to a producer at Southern Television. He's looking for a young presenter for a new kids magazine program he's starting called Three Go Round. I've given him your name, give him a ring." So I rang him up. His name was Angus Wright. He said, "Come in next Tuesday. We'll do a screen test." The following Monday night, I was out with the lads. I was perhaps drinking a little bit too much. I overslept on the Tuesday morning. I didn't have a car in those days. I missed the train from Brighton to Southampton. So I never went. And furthermore, terribly, I never bothered to ring him to tell him. The following Sunday, there was a knock on my front door. It was the same Angus Wright. And he said, "I was just in Brighton doing a bit of filming. I thought I'd pop in and see the rude so-and-so who not only didn't turn up, but never even bothered to ring me and tell me why." I said, "I'm so sorry. Come in for a cup of coffee." We sat down, had a coffee, got on well. He said, "Come in next week for a screen test, but if you don't, you'll never work for Southern Television." So the following week, I went along, did the screen test. I wasn't very good. I think I was the best of a bad bunch. The show started. It was only a 7-week run to start with. It was me and two girls. One was called Britt Allcroft. The other was called Diane Keane. Diane Keane went on to become a famous actress. Britt Allcroft, who was always happier behind the camera, in fact, eventually got the rights to Thomas the Tank Engine. She's now a multi-millionairess living in Los Angeles. So of the three of us, the one who didn't quite make it is the one who's talking to you right now. So it was all a very happy accident, to be quite honest. And 7-week contract became 57 years. Extraordinary.
Wow, what an interesting story. So a little bit like those sliding door moments, I guess, Fred. I've been speaking about them. Some of the choices that you make in life. Do you turn left? Do you turn right? And you never know if you turn one way, you don't know what happened if you would have gone the other way. So
exactly,
very interesting, Fred. And I know you've run some businesses and your kids are in businesses and what have you. So, yeah, I'm going to see if we can explore and give some ideas and inspiration to people who are running small businesses globally, particularly in light of the COVID pandemic and events like this, which, you know, they confront us from time to time, a little bit like the global financial crisis 12, 13 years ago. Believe me, that time gets away. So let's see if we can do something around that, because I know you're a keen sportsman, and you had nearly 10 years on the board of Portsmouth Football Club.
I did indeed, yes, a non-executive director.
Yep. So how's running a football club different or similar to any other businesses, particularly if you're sitting on the board right now and all the issues that they've had to deal with during COVID?
Running a football club is like running no other business at all, because football clubs are the only ones, as far as I can see, who run always at a complete loss, paying players highly inflated wages, which they can't really afford. It is a crazy business, and certainly not one that any other business owner should follow, I think. I remember a classic case at Portsmouth many years ago. Our owner was a lovely man called Milan Mandaric. Harry Redknapp was our manager at the time. And Milan said to Harry one day, "I want you to go to Japan to have a look at a young goalkeeper called Yoshi Kawaguchi, and I'm keen to sign him." So Harry went all the way to Japan, came back and said, "Milan, he's a good goalkeeper, but he's far too small for our English football. He'll get knocked all over the place. Don't sign him." But Harry said, "Milan, if we sign him, we'll make at least £1 million from advertising rights and all sorts of other things in Japan. So we've got to sign him. So Harry said, £1 million, Milan. In that case, why don't we have 2 of them? So we signed Yoshi Kawaguchi, who was a lovely chap, but Harry was quite right. He was too small for the English game. He went abroad to Sweden, I think, where he's carved out a very good career for himself. But that's how crazy football is. So my advice is don't follow the football clubs, because that's the road to absolute ruin.
Yep, probably very sound advice. Fred, you have 3 children, and your daughter Carolyn is the current UK Minister for Digital Culture, Media and Sport.
Yes.
The recent Super League fiasco, which only happened last week, must have caused some anxious moments. What are your thoughts on the concept and the way it was announced?
It was a crazy idea, absolutely crazy. It was very ill thought out, and of course it's backfired horribly on the major football clubs involved. She got caught up in that. Thankfully, it didn't last very long before they saw sense, before the fans and indeed many of the players revolted against it. So I suspect that'll be the last we hear of that for the time being.
Yeah.
But she was well caught up in that. I've got 2 other children as well. One daughter is a counsellor for victims of domestic violence. The other one, my son, actually runs a small company, a garden design business. He started from scratch. He was a policeman before, but he's got great creative ideas. It's called Hambledon Landscapes, and he's absolutely brilliant. And he's a really fine example of how a young man can have an idea, go out, develop it, and become very successful. And he's now got several other young men working for him. My own wife, many years ago, started her own company in a back bedroom of our house, designing badges for companies, name badges, recognition products. And she was very successful with that, eventually had a couple of factory units, a number of people working for her. And she still does a bit even now. So it can be done with small businesses if you've got the idea, if you've got the dedication, if you're a really hard worker. It can be done, because I've seen it.
Yep. Yeah, some interesting. I had Kevin Byrne, who was the founder of Checkatrade, on my program last time. And he was telling me how he turned an idea working from his shed into a £78 million exit business in 18 years. So a very inspirational story. I don't know if you've ever run into Kevin, but
yes, I have. And the whole thing is communication, letting people know that you are out there, that you are in business. This is what you can do. And of course, these days, I think it's a lot easier because there are so many advertising avenues for you on the internet. You know, you've got Facebook, you've got Twitter, you've got Instagram, and many other sources as well. So you've got to let people know you're out there, what you do. And of course, the finest testimonial of all is word of mouth.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Aside from your ITV commitments, Fred, you've had an interesting array of other activities. What gives you the most pleasure and why?
My greatest pleasure, strangely enough, we have 3 rescue dogs at home, and I love them so much, and we spend much of our time out walking with them. One of them, during the first lockdown, when people over 70, as you recall, were told to stay at home, one of them, called Dave Dinenage, who's a little rescue dog, I was appearing on our program, on our nightly ITV Meridian 6 o'clock show every night, doing a roundup of what people were doing during the lockdown, happy stories, uplifting stories to try and counteract the really dismal news at the time, anniversaries, birthdays, etc. And I would often use Dave Dinenage with me, the dog, sat on my lap here, and he became a sort of cult figure. People absolutely loved him. He loved looking at the screen because, of course, he could see a dog on it. He didn't realize it was him. He was absolutely fascinated. The viewers were fascinated by him. They keep asking for him to come back now, because now I'm back in the studio on a nightly basis. And the other day, my wife and I were out walking with our 3 dogs, including Dave Dinenage, the dog, when a couple came cycling by, an elderly couple, and a man at the back said, "Oh, I didn't recognize you at first, Fred, but I recognized Dave Dinenage."
Yeah.
So the dog's become more famous than me.
I've seen some of the episodes, and it's quite interesting how something accidental can turn into something strategic, almost, as I say, by accident. Interesting.
Well, I mean, I should use him for advertising, of course. You've just given me an idea now. I could make money with Dave Dinenage, the dog.
Put a little sandwich board on his back or something.
Good idea.
Fred, what about the most interesting business person that you've run across? I mean, you must have interviewed thousands over your career.
Well, yes, I have. I mean, John Medeski, who owned Reading Football Club, is a classic example of a man who had a good idea, advertising cars for sale and things like that. Medeski is a very inspirational character. Again, a man who can start with a small idea, turn it into something major. So major, in fact, he was able to buy a football club, Reading Football Club. Probably the biggest mistake he ever made, of course. But again, we never learn. So John Medeski would certainly be among the most inspirational business people that I've ever come across.
Yes, interesting. So, Fred, if we have any aspiring journalists out there, and I'm sure there will be, because we have plenty of people in media space globally, what would be the number one tip or piece of advice that you would give to any young person starting out in your field today?
I would always say to them, don't give up, keep on trying, because it's so competitive now. Every time ITV Meridian, for example, advertises a job, we get literally hundreds of applications. But the trick is to keep on, don't give up. Make yourself an absolute nuisance if necessary. Keep on bombarding television, radio, or newspapers, wherever you want to work. Keep on bombarding them with applications. Tell them how good you are. Tell them what you can offer to them. Keep on at them until in the end, they might just get fed up and let you in. But I would say, broadcasting or journalism, I would recommend it to anybody because it is the most satisfying and creative of jobs. It's wonderful.
So don't follow your early example by ignoring and not turning up and then don't tell the guy.
I'm an absolutely awful example to follow. Never, ever do what I do, because even on the day when I did that audition finally for Southern Television, I arrived in Southampton a little bit earlier and stupidly walked across the road from the studio and had a pint of bitter at the local pub. So I went in there reeking of hops, still managed to get the job, but I am the last person anybody should follow. I'm an appalling example.
Very, very interesting tale. And I think it's a reflection of times gone past and how things have changed.
Oh, totally. I mean, totally. I mean, there was in the media when I first started, there was a real sort of drinking culture. We'd go off at lunchtime and have a pint of bitter and a ploughman's lunch at the local pub. Nowadays, I mean, I'm very lucky. I'm surrounded by very talented young people, and none of that goes on these days. It's a much more concentrated, professional approach than it ever used to be. I mean, those old days were glorious and they were good fun, but now it's much more competitive. I mean, here at ITV Meridian every night, we in fact do 3 programs, not 1 at 6 o'clock, because our region is quite big. So in order to make it good local regional TV, we do 3 different programs. One for the Thames Valley, up there in Oxford and Reading, etc. One for the west of the region, which stretches from Weymouth in the west right across to the other side of Brighton. And then one for the southeast of our region, which stretches from Brighton all the way around to Southend. So we actually do 3 half-hour programs every single night, 2 recorded as close as we can to 6 o'clock and 1 live at 6 o'clock. It varies every night. Whichever is the newsiest program is the one that goes out live. But hopefully people can't actually tell which is the live one. So it's now much harder, much more competitive than it ever used to be. And all the drinking culture is now completely gone. It's very professional.
Yeah. Fred, you've got a very iconic voice. And we will have a lot of budding podcasters, speakers, speech makers that'll be on this event. I remember your voice doing that American series on the Americans, most evil killers or something, and it truly is an iconic voice. Do you do anything to foster your voice? What tips would you give to making a great presentation into camera or radio?
Funnily enough, my wife says to me, my voice has got very, very sloppy. And because in the old days, I've seen old video footage of myself. There was one, it was that Queen Mary was in Southampton docks and about to set sail from Southampton. I'm talking now about 1966 or something like that. And there I am in a sports jacket on the dockside at Southampton docks with the Queen Mary behind me. And I'm saying, and the Queen Mary is just about to set sail for New York on this epic Atlantic crossing. And I spoke like that. And we all did speak like that at the time. Now, according to my wife, I talk quite common, but that's just the way I am. But I've never had any voice training or anything like that. Strangely enough, I hail actually originally from Birmingham, which does have quite an accent of its own. But I never inherited that. My brother did to a degree, my sister did to a degree, but I never did have that Brummie accent, except when I've had a few pints of ale. And then suddenly I start speaking Brummie.
Yeah. Fred, it's interesting, and it's interesting here I'm from Australia, and there's very little regional differences. But here in the UK, you can go 10 miles down the road and people speak with a different accent, which is quite interesting.
Well, it is because in the old days, going back to the 60s and the 70s, everybody had a similar sort of accent. Now, of course, it's completely diverse. You get all sorts of accents from every different part of the globe, every different part of the United Kingdom. And now it's completely acceptable, and quite rightly so, you know.
Yep, absolutely. So, Fred, I really loved the story that when one day you posed as a homeless person and sat in the streets of Winchester, not to mock them, but to get an understanding and a feeling what it was like to be homeless. And of course, during this COVID pandemic, there's been a lot of people in this position, a lot of people unemployed and sadly on the streets. What did you learn from that experience?
That was a very, very interesting experience. That was a documentary made by TVS, Television South, who were formerly the operators here in the south of England. And this was a documentary about homelessness and homeless people and the problems they faced. So I dressed up in really, really scruffy clothing. The makeup department, which we had at those times, put me on a kind of stubble and made me look really, really rough, really, to be honest. And I sat there with a little begging bowl and a dog beside me, sat on a blanket in the middle of Winchester. And really, to be quite honest, the reaction I got then from people was actually quite shocking, because most people would actually do a complete detour to avoid going past me. And one or two who did come past were highly offensive and very abusive. They didn't realize it was me. They just thought it literally was a beggar on the streets of Winchester. One or two were very kind. One or two did sort of chuck a bit of money or make a nice comment. But I have to say the vast majority were a little bit unkind. I do feel now there is a much greater understanding of the needs of the homeless. At the time, local councils weren't very sympathetic either. I think now they certainly are. In places like Oxford, etc., they actually have built accommodation for homeless people or put them up in hotels during this pandemic. So I think there is a greater understanding now about the needs of the homeless. As somebody said on our program just last night, this was a homeless man, you know, we didn't choose to be like this, but circumstances made us like this. And, you know, honestly, it's like mental health. You know, it's when I used to go to Broadmoor Hospital to see Ronnie Cray, who was a patient at Broadmoor Hospital for the criminally insane, because I was writing a book with him and his brother. The chief psychiatrist at Broadmoor Hospital said to me, the dividing line between, if you like, sanity and insanity is really like a thread. It's that narrow. And it's the same with homelessness. You know, circumstances can make you or me or anybody go into that position. You know, yep. You never know.
Yep. Interesting there. And I guess following that COVID and having to work remotely and the mental health issues of isolation has really come to the fore. And I know you've spoken about this a little bit, but can you share thoughts on not only coping with those type of issues. But where do you see working and remote working? Where do you see that going forward?
I think there's a bit of a danger here, because I hear of more and more major companies who've now realized that they can have the workers working from home and therefore save themselves an absolute fortune in renting huge office blocks. So more and more people will be working from home. Now, that does suit some people, to be quite honest. I spoke to a young chap the other day working for a health company. He's based in the Bournemouth area. Normally, in the old days, pre-pandemic days, he would have to drive all the way up to Slough, he told me, to work. He's now working from home, and it suits him much better. But of course, for many people, it doesn't work out like that at all. There is this problem of isolation, of loneliness. There's the problem also of, being surrounded by people all the time in a home, and everyone needs to escape. So I think there are real dangers here in this thing of working from home. And I do think more and more companies are going to be encouraging the staff, telling the staff to do that once this pandemic has cleared up, which hopefully it will be.
Yeah. And I think we're moving towards a more hybrid type of environment. To all the indications are that is going to be the case. So, Fred, you've written a number of books, from children's to the Cray twins. My God, there's a couple of bookends. What's next?
Well, I might be doing a book on a former footballer who fell on hard times. That's a project which I'm discussing at the moment. I'd love to write my own book, to be quite honest. Not a sort of this is what I've achieved sort of thing, but more some of the funny things that have happened along the way, some of the interesting experiences, like, as you mentioned, the Cray twins, Reggie and Ronnie. I think I could do quite a nice story of also sometimes it won't be all right on the night, things that have gone wrong over the years, this sort of thing. So that's something else I'd like to consider. But you need time to write books. And at the moment, I'm amazingly still working, still managing to get away with it. With my work here at ITV Meridian, as you've mentioned, I do the Evil Killers programs for Sky, which is shown in the UK, various other countries, including America. So that keeps me quite busy as well. Also, a few months ago, a show called How came back. I mean, I started that program. It's a children's program. I started that way back in 1966. It was a brilliant invention by a great broadcaster called Jack Hargreaves, who was such an incredible influence on my early career. And it ran from 1966 to about 1980 on Southern Television. They lost the franchise. Then amazingly, in the mid-90s, it came back as How To. TBS started that. TBS then lost their franchise. Everybody I work for tends to lose their franchise. Let that be a warning to you, John.
Yeah, I have to watch out.
And then Scottish Television in Glasgow picked it up, and that ran for another 16 or 17 years. And then again, things changed, the show ended. And then amazingly enough, it started again. How? This time with three very young, very talented presenters, but they gave me my own little cameo spot at the end of each program, which I've thoroughly enjoyed. So in all those years, I've not missed a single episode of How, and it's been such a fantastic program for me. So I've had a lot of variety, including sport as well. So I've just been incredibly lucky, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I have a thing that most people make their own luck, but that's another story, I guess. So you're not thinking of taking a little leaf from Paul Simon's books. It just came into my head. The book could be called Incidents and Accidents, Hints and Allegations.
I'll tell you what, I might nick that from you. Thank you very much.
But interesting thought just sprung into my head there. So viewers to TV station are the same as customers to a business. What tips would you give any business owners on how to better engage with either your audience or your customer base or stuff like that?
Very much to use the internet, to use Facebook, to use Twitter, Instagram, and all the other sources. Get out there, advertise yourself on them, because people do watch them in huge numbers, in growing numbers, in actual fact. In fact, people are watching TV, especially young people are watching TV now more on their iPads, etc. So get out there, advertise yourself. And that's the way to reach an audience these days. And I think it's very, very lucky for businesses. They've got all these different avenues to explore. You know, we never had that in the old days, and I think it's a wonderful thing. It really is.
Yep, I've been outspoken over the years on some of the things that some of the media people create from time to time. No names, no pack drill. Where media tends today to be more around creating the news rather than reporting it. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think there's a big danger here as well, and also a danger perhaps too much of broadcasters venting their own opinions. Certainly in some cases it seems to work. I mean, Piers Morgan at Good Morning Britain is a classic example, because when he started on that programme, Good Morning Britain was suffering badly in the ratings, and our business is all about ratings because advertisers pay more when the ratings are high. Piers Morgan came in, that show was struggling, and on the day he left, it had actually clawed back that audience and was in front of the BBC. And since he's gone, of course, the ratings seem to have suffered somewhat. So Piers Morgan is a classic example of how it can work. And so, certainly some people, although some hated him, others absolutely loved him. So, but there is a danger, I think, in broadcasters like me. Well, we're just not allowed to vent our own opinion, except on light-hearted matters, and I think that's the way it should be. We're here to report news, not to give too many personal comments. That's just my own personal view.
Yep, Fred, with such a busy schedule, and I know we had quite a few scheduling issues to even get this interview with you today, and I really appreciate your time and how your team have been able to fit this in out there. How do you fit in all what you do with personal priorities as well?
It's not easy, is it? You know, you have to sort of think about it and budget your time so that you don't neglect other parts of your life which are important. So I think you've got to have a plan and a schedule and work out, all the things you want to do, but bear in mind other people's needs as well. So it's not an easy one. And certainly the people viewing this particular video will probably have the same issues themselves. You've got to plan it and not get too tired, not get too forgetful about other people's needs. I think you've really got to have a plan.
That's a great point, and probably a good point to finish on. Everybody's got a plan, they'll have some sort of direction. So it's been a great pleasure, Fred, to have you on our show today, and I'm sure people will be very interested in following up with some of your incidents and accidents and hints and allegations. So I'll look forward to see how you can buy me a pint if the book ever comes out. So Fred, Dinenage, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show today.
It's been good talking to you, John. I wish your organisation every success, and everybody watching this particular interview, I wish them every success and happiness in the future. And that, as the old broadcaster used to say, and still does from time to time, that is how. For now, but only for now.
Thank you very much.